Zigzag were like these alien puppets. And there was a turkey who went on to represent Ireland in the Eurovision.
And saying that out loud sounds insane.
Pretty cool place. If you're marching.
Or a vampire. Get yourself a good shark. Get yourself a good shark.
Pretty cool place. Pretty cool place.
Hello and welcome to the Retro Rejects. This week we were talking about 80s metal, and we're probably going to have, you're going to hear maybe the patter of little footsteps throughout the episode, because we've got our dog underneath us who's fucking really hyper at the moment. He's a puppy, and our cat, the two of them are getting on a little bit better, so it's a little bit like fucking stepbrothers at times with the two of them. So we've hardwood floors, which is a little bit over information, I suppose.
It is a bit, yes, but at least if you might hear tapping,
yeah, so we could just like lock him out and kind of like beat him. But
they'll only scream.
Yeah, that wouldn't be very nice, so we just have to let them. And of course, then there's the cat is over at Laura's very expensive Gibson Flying V.
Yes.
And I'm surprised if the microphone wasn't on, she'd be like, get the fuck out.
Leave my fucking guitar alone.
There we go.
Yeah,
there he's gone. There's one of them gone anyway. Well, yeah, anyway, 80s metal.
Yes, exactly, yeah. That was a bit of a long introduction with absolutely nothing to do with 80s metal.
Yeah, just to give a bit of background on the 80s metal scene.
Yeah. Featuring our dog and cat and the other cat who doesn't appear only to snort.
So I suppose as well, to put it in context, obviously we're Irish. So it's like an Irish take on 80s metal. A lot of times when you see stuff about 80s metal, it's from the American kind of point of view, where they talk about like the new wave of British metal invasion, and it kind of just touches on it. It's mostly glam metal, that or hair metal, but over here it wasn't like an invasion of the new wave. It was just metal.
Yeah.
That was in it, or some of them called it hard rock. I suppose it kind of kick-started probably the end of the 70s into the 80s with Motorhead, Def Leppard. Who went away after it. There's, I don't know if you can get it on YouTube, but if anyone can, there's like for people that are old enough to remember Behind the Music, VH1 Behind the Music. The Simpsons had a brilliant episode on it. Was like Behind the Laughter or something like that, taking the piss out of it. But they did an amazing one about Def Leppard, and Def Leppard, like they rose to fucking like international superstar fame in the late 70s and early 80s, like, and they were massive over in America. Then when they were going off, I think it was at Hysteria was the one that we kind of would have grown up with kind of like Animal and all that stuff on it. Before they went to recording that, the drummer had a car crash and lost his arm, and they were like, oh, this is the end of the road. And I know a lot of bands carry on after stuff like that, but I think Def Leppard were really like, well, if he's fucked, we're
exactly. He stays in the band and he learns to drum with one arm. Yeah, and he did.
Well, he decided on it, and they were like, "Oh, this ain't going to work." So, it worked, and he was like using that's what it was, electronic drums at the time, and it gave a very distinctive sound, I think, to that album. But that was massive. But yeah, Def Leppard were just a fucking massive band. But Behind the Music on Def Leppard is great because they have a lot of footage from around that time, and the drummer talking about his rehab and his thought process of getting to where it is. And like, I mean, for a one-armed drummer, it's
pretty I can't drum when I've got two arms.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like when you listen to it, like, I mean, it's, I don't know, I can't hear any different. You know, I don't listen to it and kind of go,
God, you're missing a beat there.
Arm, exactly. Missing an arm there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
obviously just speaks to his skill and his, sort of determination, I suppose.
But over here, the Def Leppard were fucking, I know they were massive, but like they were, that was the big difference between the 80s, I think, and the 90s even so much. Like, even like the Limp Bizkit was getting into the charts in the 90s, and people were like, oh, it's not metal. And it's like, it was fucking heavier than a lot of stuff, people. It was heavier than Britney Spears.
Yeah, or Bewitched or whatever.
Yeah,
Justin
at the time.
Timberlake.
Yeah, I think people shit on Limp Bizkit a little bit too much because of Fred Durst. Fred Durst would say that he was playing a character, but he's not. He was an asshole. Like, I mean, he got mad massive. Went from being like a fucking
A tattoo artist, wasn't he?
yeah, but I don't think he was like a studio tattoo artist. I think he was just like, you know, doing it out of his house and stuff. You know, because even like Korn, that was how they got like signed. Was he did free tattoos on Korn after a show, and they were like the worst tattoos ever, like Korn or you know, and
maybe you should try music instead of tattoo.
They listened to the Limp Bizkit's demo, and Limp Bizkit, like the first album, is fucking heavy. Like they were a metal band.
We're not talking about Limp Bizkit though. We're talking about the 80s.
I'm talking about him.
All right, fair enough then.
All right.
Okay.
I
suppose to paint a picture of Ireland in the 80s though, it was like, I mean,
people going around Limp Bizkit t-shirts.
Yes, ahead of their time and all the rest. But no, it seemed to be a slightly different culture in Ireland insofar as like that was music, if you know what I mean. It wasn't like an alternative scene per se.
No,
they were in, like, I mean, Van Halen were in the charts, Def Leppard were in the charts.
Like there was a TV show that was for kids called The Den. Which
used to play cartoons basically. They'd have a presenter in between, just like, you know, kind of.
But it's what there was Zig and Zag were just two of the presenters with a human. Zig and Zag were like these alien puppets. And there was a turkey who went on to represent Ireland in the Eurovision.
And saying that out loud sounds insane. Yeah.
And then there was Podge and Rog, which was like an evil.
He started off as an evil postman, I think.
Yeah.
And then
he was at first. Remember, he was just a doll that was left there. And then he started coming to life at the end,
terrorizing the human presenter.
Yeah, and then he became a postman, and they were like, "Oh, it's Postman Pat," and they didn't think it was
Podge.
And then it was like, "Oh my God, it's Podge
in disguise."
Yeah.
And then they had Socky, the sock monster.
Yeah, Socky wasn't so popular.
He was for the younger kids.
Yeah,
exactly.
But on that, they used to regularly play. I think that was probably the first time I heard Fate No More.
Yeah,
because like Epic by Fate No More was massive in Ireland, and it was like at least once a week I think it was played.
Oh yeah.
But like AC/DC were always really big in Ireland.
That's something. It's not an Irish wedding unless AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, and Metallica are played. Probably in quick succession as well, because you'll get all the dads to be out with their ties off and wrapped around their head, like, you know, sort of, "Oh, you've been thunderstruck." And same as well, like the national anthem is like Enter Sandman. Or like, you know.
Well, I bought that The Razor's Edge on cassette tape when I was on school tour, when it was just after coming out.
Jesus, what age are you?
I don't know.
Young.
10 maybe? 12? No, maybe 10 or I don't know, around that. But yeah,
that's the thing. And there used to be like a music show in Ireland on, like, again, to paint a picture. Yeah, Ireland had like one national TV station for like many years, and then it went up to 2, and everyone's like hysterical. They're like, "Oh my God, we've got 2 TV channels. That's fantastic." Whereas like America had like 64 or whatever the hell at that stage. You know, Dire Straits, 6 more channels. But this show was like, it was like Top of the Pops for Ireland basically, but like everyone in Ireland would have tuned in on a Sunday morning to watch the beatbox, and the beatbox did sort of skew. Looking back on it now, there was an awful lot of heavy rock, hard rock.
Very little pop on it.
Yeah.
Really, like.
And they gave a lot of airplay as well to Irish indie bands as well, you know, which I think was quite good as well, you know. I
think it might have been the first time I heard Sonic Youth as well. Might have been on that, because there used to be shows as well. I think it was in the 90s, No Disco.
Yeah.
Was on
late night, Friday night, I think, or Thursday night.
Where they had a lot of alternative music on it. Not metal though.
But just alternative, I
suppose at the time what was really big was the old fucking, why can't I think of it though, with the like the Jazz Master and My Bloody Valentine,
yeah.
Shoegaze.
Yeah.
Irish band as well.
Yes, exactly.
And that there's a dog out after the cat now. So I expect to hear lots of thundering around, and then little pitter patter, kind of like paws coming back in again.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, ignore that.
Yeah, but yeah, like Top of the Pops for a lot of people who might know, and even people that are from, they might remember Top of the Pops. It was like chart show where they
countdown from 30 to number 1, and everyone would be hanging on. Like the DJ presenters, a crowd in the background. They'd have a couple of live bands playing. They'd play a few videos of like songs, and it's like you'd wait with bated breath every week. What's going to be number 1?
A lot of the time it was Iron Maiden. That was what it's going to get to with the new wave of British heavy metal, which was, like, say, the first wave of British heavy metal didn't even really think of themselves as being heavy metal, like, say, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. Even Black Sabbath refer to themselves as hard rock a lot of the time. So then I think for me, Motorhead was the beginning of heavy metal, really. Like, I mean, say Black Sabbath, technically, you know, kind of for metal, but Motorhead and that mixture of punk
kind of speed,
and aggression
kind of
and
metal,
that loudness and that kind of dirtiness. Like, I mean, fucking Black, like a lot of people don't realize, I think, how big Black Sabbath were. That they were playing like very quickly into their career, like these big open arenas. They were fucking global
massive,
superstars.
like in the States, yeah.
Yeah, like I mean,
For like a couple of lads from the north of England, you know.
yeah, they were fucking absolutely massive. Like it wasn't, when people think back, I think because they have this kind of view of metal, it's people that weren't there, like we weren't there, but like seeing kind of like, you know, footage and like, you know, interviews, like they were one of the biggest bands in the whole world, in their prime.
Yeah.
Prime for the set, you know, they had different phases, but it's just fucking mental. But like Van Halen weren't that big over here. I think Van Halen were big,
Well,
but
I mean,
they
like
weren't.
again, they had the couple of hits, like, you know, Jump and stuff.
Yeah, it
like
was
that.
with Jump, that album, but like I mean, say the album before that, you know, that would have been really big over in I think the first Van Halen 1, I think it was, that was like massive. Or I don't think. Because people, you wouldn't talk to all the people over here would say when they think of Van Halen was Jump, and that was because it was played non-stop by the Den.
Exactly,
again,
on kid shows, exactly. Yeah, that was it, yeah. But but that's, I suppose, sort of that was the scene, I suppose, in Ireland, especially at the time. It was like, you know, sort of, you would have Van Halen on the kid shows, you'd have all of this kind of stuff, and you'd have, as I said, Motorhead. Like Motorhead are still considered a big band and all the rest. But yeah, just sort of cracking off the start of the 80s, like.
Yeah, with the Iron Maiden, I think were the biggest. For predominantly, they were really big.
When about, this is just something anecdotally again, when was like Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter? When was that out? I can remember singing that.
That would have been the end of the 80s, I suppose, or going into the early 90s.
But that was like a big song in primary school. People would be running around singing, and they wouldn't have a clue of like Iron Maiden,
Yeah, like I mean, that was, and the video was kind of shit. Well, a lot of Maiden's videos were shit.
Awful.
Like Holy Smoke, if anyone ever, where it's basically a bunch of priests smoking and just smoke coming out of their yellow teeth, you know, where you kind of go, you could do a bit better. Like you're
very literal there.
You're fucking one of the biggest bands in the world at the time. But like, I mean, like what people loved Maiden because it was, they had that dark imagery, but it was like nearly Hammer horror film.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff where people weren't like, oh my god,
they're Satanists.
They're in league with the devil. Yeah. Whereas kind of like with Slayer, people were, or like,
someone like Venom or someone like that.
Yeah,
like,
people were
my
like,
God. Yeah.
But then you'd see him live and you kind of go, has he got a receding hairline? I'm sure
That's not very devilish.
Kronos, isn't these? Sure, what was it in like Kronos, Mantis, something, and Steve?
Oh yeah. But that's, I suppose, again, like they would have been sort of, I suppose, kind of the progenitors of like black metal, I suppose, and you know, sort of crossovers,
Venom
and thrash. Yeah.
Oh yeah, God, yeah, Venom were, I said Venom were fucking highly influential.
Like, I mean, they had a whole album called Black Metal, like, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it was they were more speed metal, and I kind of, that's where kind of between them and Motorhead probably sparked off the whole thrash movement, then, I suppose.
But like, I mean, I didn't really hear Venom for years. There, you know, there was like there was an underground metal scene kind of going. I think when thrash metal would have come around, it was very much. I think it took a while for it to get over to this side of the water. Like Metallica seemed to be. This is the weird thing with Metallica, though. Metallica just seemed to have always been big. And I think it might have been like the merchandise for Metallica hit over, and Slayer definitely hit Ireland before the music.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you go into any young fella's wardrobe in the whole of Ireland, you will find probably a Metallica and a Slayer t-shirt somewhere at the back. And like you could be walking up the side of a mountain out in the middle of nowhere, and there's some shepherd like minding their flock of sheep, and he's got like a Slayer t-shirt on.
That was the thing though. Like Slayer for a long time in Ireland was really associated with, like, you'd see someone wearing a Slayer t-shirt and you go, oh, they're from the fucking middle of the country.
They're the country, it is really that. Yeah, there's a phenomenon in Ireland called the culture, which is basically anyone that's not from a town. They're kind of country boys or whatever, and out driving tractors.
Probably farmers.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it just seemed to be huge. Like, I mean, if you're a fan of Metallica, like, even I only said to you the other day, I was like, oh, there's somebody in work likes Metallica. And like, oh, is he Culture? And I was like, yeah, of course he is. Why would you not think like otherwise, you know?
But that was, I suppose, and like, I mean, I would have been, I suppose...
You were on the borderline between Culture and town.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have been suburbs. It was well before the suburbs existed.
But you would have been a village beside a big city.
Yeah.
Well, I say big. Big for Ireland.
Yeah, see, Ireland's mentality as well is, say, you have to be in a place for a couple of generations
before they consider you local. Otherwise, you're blowing.
Yeah, and I think people get this wrong that are different, say, nationalities in Ireland. When someone in Ireland might say to them, "Where are you from?" Because like people in Ireland, they just ask that to fucking everyone.
Yeah.
Where it's not like what country are you from?
It's
Where
not
you?
kind of a racism thing. It's like, oh, where are you from? Because then they start going, oh, I think I know your grandmother.
Yeah.
Your aunt is related to my aunt, and it's this whole trace.
Because Ireland is so small, people are obsessed with it. Like, I mean, even the whole thing, it would be like, say, I'm living not in the county that I'm originally from, but I would never be considered to be like from this county.
No,
I'll always be
matter how
considered
long
to be
you've
like
lived here.
from Waterford kind of a thing. People will always be like, oh, he's from Waterford.
Yeah, oh, he moved across the bridge. He's not really from here. It's like you've been living here like donkeys.
Yeah,
years.
and if we had kids, they would be, it'd be kind
They're
of
like they're foreigners.
yeah, it would be like, there would be kind of a thing, sure, they're from Waterford, but that's where we grew up because my father would have been from the town and my mother would have been kind of from the town as well,
then they
even though
moved
they were
out.
out in the country for fucking 40, 50 fucking years.
In the same county.
They were considered townies.
Yeah.
Like with it, so I suppose we would have had that towny attitude where it was like, I don't know, it was like into more modern.
Very modern, like back in the 80s, like Slayer and Metallica.
Oh, I know,
like
but I actually listened to Slayer.
know, yeah.
That was the difference.
Yeah, you weren't just wearing the merch.
Yeah, no, it was where it was I had like Rain and Blood on tape, whereas like if you went to someone that was from like fucking Mooncoin and had a Slayer t-shirt, it's like the Kardashians, where you'd be like, name 2 songs, and they'd be like, oh, Slayer.
Well, in fairness though, I mean, like that's probably the difference between the country and the town as well. Like I grew up in the country. I wasn't a huge fan of metal back in the 80s now, I have to say, at all. But you go to a local disco or something like that, and the end of the night, you'd have... Ireland always had this weird tradition of playing out the national anthem at the end of a disco, so you'd stand up and listen to a Raw and a Vian. But the second national anthem was always like Enter Sandman or something like that. Because you'd have it, or it'd be Thunderstruck or something, but like you'd have kids that'd be out and they're bopping away to like whatever poppy chart shit is going on. Then all of a sudden you have just a couple of Metallica songs and the crowd goes wild. And everyone is out on the dance floor fucking pogoing away, like. And it's just that Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, like, I mean, oh my god, now I don't class Bon Jovi as metal, but it was just, if you're from, I actually made a stand by not liking Bon Jovi, being from the country. Everyone in my local town went to Bon Jovi when he played in Ireland, and I was like, no, I won't.
Well, that was the Bon Jovi was considered rock enough to it, Brian, but I it's like we were looking at Sam Dunn's Metal Evolution. Like, we've seen it a load of times, but for some reason, looking at the glam metal one, I was like, I don't think we've seen a lot of this before. And I was surprised, like Bon Jovi, like Twisted Sister wasn't in it, and Bon Jovi wasn't mentioned as well when they were like in the 80s,
early Pantera.
Yeah,
for as much as they tried to distance themselves.
Like, but it's like Bon Jovi were massive in the 80s, like in 90s as well,
I
and
could
probably
not turn
early
around,
2000s.
in school at any stage without somebody go, oh my god, Bon Jovi's fucking amazing. And I was like, oh my god, no, he's not. Jesus
I
Christ.
love Bon Jovi in the 80s. Then when I was a teenager, I'd take the piss out of people that like Bon Jovi. No, I'd be like, I secretly like Bon Jovi.
That's all. That was it. I secretly was like, God, these songs are cool, but at the same point,
I thought Bon Jovi was pretty cool.
Some of the songs you'd listen to, and you just can't help like singing along because they're so stupidly anthemic. But like people are like, "Oh, do you like Bon Jovi?" No, that's for losers.
Is what they worked their way up from being a small band. Now, kind of when you look back on like the history of Bon Jovi, they had like connections to like the Sinatras and all these different people. But still, if the songs were shit, that was I think the thing in the 80s as well. Didn't matter how much fucking money,
or how much pull or clout you had. If your songs are shit, people just go, fuck off.
Yeah, you weren't going to be sticking around. And like Bon Jovi is still going. I think I haven't heard because we don't really follow kind of newer music. But if you release an album in the morning, I think I'd definitely give it a listen to anyway, just to see what
it was up to like. Yeah.
But Bon Jovi was fucking absolutely massive in Ireland.
That was a proper culture marker if you were like a fan of Bon Jovi.
Well, Living on a Prayer is still played at every wedding as well.
Again, yes, exactly. It's not an Irish wedding unless you have certain songs, and it's like if you ever go to a wedding they don't play it. It's like, well, they technically didn't get married then.
But like but like fucking Twisted Sister were massive in Ireland as well. Like I mean, you got the big ones like I Wanna Rock and I'm Not Your Dad.
What?
Yeah. But I think the first song of Twisted Sister I ever heard was their cover of The Leader of the Pack.
Oh God.
Or was it them that did it? Maybe it was Cinderella. I think it was did it. I couldn't be bothered looking it up because
You're just too lazy.
Yeah, it's too lazy.
Hot for Teacher was?
Van Halen.
Van Halen, yeah, that was another big one back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Big one back in the 80s, yeah. So that's like, I mean, again, that was like, I mean, I, as a small child, say in primary school and all the rest, I didn't necessarily follow bands or anything like that, but there were some songs that you just knew inside out because of this whole thing of their constant airplay, constant video play, like even before like MTV was a thing, constant radio play, and all, you just couldn't get away from it.
But like, I mean, the thing is, what you'd have the critics of all that kind of music, and when you hear people talking about glam metal in the 80s, or hair metal really was known as over here, because glam was kind of associated, I suppose, with like with David Bowie and Mark Bowl and T-Rex, that kind of era rock.
Yeah, that was what we would consider glam over this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah,
I suppose,
but like with hair metal, it was still like had the hits, like Poison had a few hits over here. Motley Crue, not so much so.
Yeah.
I don't really remember. I think it was like a teenager when I kind of actually heard of Motley Crue, and it would have been when they had like the girls stuff out, probably in, I think that was 90s.
That's the thing, I mean, stuff like Rat and all the rest wasn't
Never
super
heard of
huge
them,
over here. Like
Only heard of those on Rock Band, I think, wasn't it?
That was it, yeah.
The Dokken, it was like we're talking about on the Nightmare on Elm Street episode that we did. That was the first time I heard of those. And then when you find out that they were like massive over in the state, and they were like just
oh my
massive,
God, yeah.
you're like, they were never really. And the thing was, like, in Ireland as well, like Laura was saying, that there was only like the 2 television channels. There was only like the 2 radio channels.
Yeah, yeah, it was actually. Yeah.
So like there was a metal show on Sunday nights. But
was it John Kenny still
John
back
Kenny,
then?
yeah.
Jesus Christ, he's going a long time.
Yeah, and you know, there wasn't. It was like whatever they were playing, and like it was the same crowd.
I guess he's playing Napalm, so we listened to Napalm.
But it was already, and you had your local radios, but local radio stations just kind of play the same stuff, and
it was a lot of it was
old music.
I was just going to say it's catering to an older audience that tuned into the local station, so it was always kind of like country or like show bands or middle of the road sort of stuff, dad rock kind of a thing. But of course, I know dad rock is probably what we're listening to now because we're so old at this stage. But it was like 50s and 60s kind of stuff.
But it was hard to be kind of like exposed to stuff on that. Like, I mean, I suppose my first, when I started getting it was like getting like some Metal Hammer on magazine, and Kerrang, and I think it was Raw Power was another one, it was a metal one, and the odd time they do tapes with it, and you hear
giveaway, a couple of singles.
Yeah, and I think the first kind of like what would have been considered a metal band or trash band at the time, I don't know even if they'd be considered, Armoured Saint. Singer John Bush ended up singing with Anthrax, but I loved those when I was a kid, but that was only based on here and that, you know, those, and it was just with Slayer. It was like, it was a friend gave me a Slayer, well, sold me a Slayer tape.
Sold
like it was Rain and Blood, because they were scared of it or something, you know, and they were like, oh, I can't. I was like, oh, and then I was listening to getting nightmares. I was going to sleep. But you know, it was like they were.
And just actually to touch on that as well, your friend getting it and then ended up being scared of it, that was a big thing as well, how people actually discovered music in the 80s. Like, you didn't have any like insight into like bands. You go in and you go into a record store and you'd be like,
oh, it's on the cover,
that cover looks cool, I will buy that. And then you go home and like, oh my God, this is brilliant, or this is shit, I'm after spending like £10 on it, so I have to listen to it for the next 6 months. And like that would have happened a lot. I can remember going into, there used to be a second-hand record shop in Waterford.
That store was kind of responsible for a lot of people getting into kind of metal as well.
Metal and indie, so because you just go in, there'd be a load of like second-hand singles or bootleg tapes, and you'd be like, fuck it, it's like £2.
But they were very hard to get, because like the record stores that were around, they weren't like specialist record stores, because they were just record stores. So and like record sales, even though they were doing all right, like, I mean, they started diversifying at that stage and splitting off, doing VHS, and VHS you could buy them, and so but, and like, I mean, tapes is what, like, I mean, that's what the reason when you hear people, if you weren't from around that, when people are talking about tape trading, that was for a lot of people how you got
discover
things.
new
So
music,
you fucking kind of like people that advertise, or some people that have their names and stuff like that in the back of a metal magazine. There was, I think it was Terrorizer was the one that there was like, I got in, but that would have been into the 90s with, say, some black metal tapes that I got from the original kind of, well, the second wave of black metal stuff, and some death metal kind of things, and as well from a friend's older brother. But that's how you found those things, because they weren't selling them in fucking, not in Ireland anyway.
Not in the likes of, say, Golden Disc or whatever, that would be at the standard sort of like middle of the road sort of record store.
Remember, it was, and like, I mean, they started it probably in the 90s. There was one store that opened up and started getting, but they were like imported metal kind of things. I remember getting Cathedral, and even an Ozzy Osbourne record was seen as an import. Yeah. It was like, I think it was the album with No More Tears on. But that was like an import, and it was probably more expensive
And I remember as well, you used to have to order stuff up specifically as well. You go in, you kind of like, do you have this? And they're like, no. And it's like, will you get it in for me, please? Yeah. When it'll be in, I don't know, check back in the next 6 months.
We'll have to get in from America. But like, I mean, going into the 90s now got different, but still with that, it was an underground, or not an underground, it could have been like someone like Helmet could never get a Helmet record fucking anywhere in the 90s.
Or even 9 Inch Nails, like, I mean,
9 Inch Nails, you had to order that.
I had to order stuff in, like, for 9 Inch Nails,
Sure, that's when I came across 9 Inch Nails, a Downward Spiral. It was in, like, say, would it be Golden Discs was like big commercial kind of...
middle of the road kind of... a chain kind of like of record
and they
stores.
normally have stuff like fucking Kenny Rogers, or kind of like Daniel O'Donnell was this guy that was massive in Ireland and stuff, so it'd be all that kind of crap. I remember seeing it in there and I was like, what the fuck is this doing here?
How did this get in here?
And buying it, and that was, I hadn't heard that album anywhere yet, because we didn't have MTV over here.
That's it. You actually got MTV way sooner than I did, because you were in the town and I was in the... I didn't get MTV till I left for college at like 18.
Yeah, but that would have been all in the 90s. In the 80s it was, like we were saying, it was the Beatbox, RTE, and RTE Radio. So like, you were very limited, but I think maybe there wasn't a big and underground metal scene. It wasn't kind of like after coming to the surface. Really with it, or maybe people didn't realise how big it was. Whereas like over in America, it was like people appreciated how big a scene it was, like, because they saw it from people going and attending concerts and things.
That's what I was going to say, and it is like, I mean, if you ever watch any like metal documentaries, say just going to either the glam or the thrash side, they all kind of, spanned out like Sunset Boulevard for like the glam side. So if you're around there, you were exposed directly to all these bands as it happened. And same with thrash, like if you grew up sort of around those areas where like the Whiskey A Go-Go or the Troubadour or any of those kind of places, Ruthie's, all of these kind of like famous kind of like bars and like halls at the time, that's where you actually got to see it, and you were right in the epicenter of all of this. Whereas over here, how the hell did you get to hear something like this?
And it seemed to be that there was like a community over there as well, people that were travelling around gigs that were doing the tape trading as well. So that's how people are like, oh, this is Metallica, fucking give the tape, and then like before you know it, the tape is all over the place and stuff. Whereas that wasn't really a thing, and it was really only true kind of like, mailing people
and
that you were getting.
The population in Ireland is just so small as well. There weren't that many people involved in it either as well.
Actually, that's how I got Sepultura. I forgot that kind of like with it. And I think that was in the 80s with Sepultura. The cat, it says, yes, it was the 80s.
Agreeing, yes.
With it, but like, I mean, like what we were saying with the t-shirts, it was a thing. For some reason, the merchandise hit the country, whereas like the
music itself was to follow a little bit.
Because I had a load of Megadeth posters and Sepultura posters when I was a kid. I loved Rattlesnake Vic, or whatever his fucking name was.
Fake Rattlehead.
Fake Rattlehead, yeah. And it was, I don't know, there was just something, because like that was a big thing over here as well. Like, I mean, Iron Maiden had Eddie, so it seemed to be for a metal band. They needed a mascot.
You do well.
And like anytime, well, not anytime, but sometimes when Eddie was on Top of the Pops, or when Iron Maiden were on Top of the Pops, like Eddie would make an appearance.
I'd be waiting to see it, like, But that was the thing, is merch probably did, like, I mean, people are like, oh, this band is after selling out, they'd be talking about Kiss, like, oh, they put their name and everything. That's how you get known as well, because I mean, like, we had this, place called the Apple Mart. I'm sure loads of places have their own little version of this where it's like a flea market.
Now it would be a fucking kind of like a farmer's market.
It'd be very posh. But back in the day, it was like selling like, I don't know, kind of knockdown price, kind of like sweets and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was
and
bootleg t-shirts.
Yeah, but that was what I was getting. It was bootleg. You know, there were other few bits and pieces like cheap jewellery and stuff like that. But it was all bootleg knockoff
jackets.
T-shirts.
Or you remember that? The NAF jackets people used to be wearing.
And like the logo would like wash off in the rain or something like that. But that was how I ended up getting a lot of my first t-shirts of like, you know, I started going around and going, geez, that's a cool t-shirt, I'll buy that. And they're like, I'm going to wear the t-shirt, I better fucking listen to the band or I better watch the film or whatever. Like,
but that's the thing when people are giving out about someone like the Kardashians or kind of like, you know, whatever kind of pop star playing or wearing a t-shirt.
Well, at least they're bringing a bit of...
It's like, it's fucking giving...
exposure, and awareness to the whole thing.
It's actually quite good. Who fucking cares if they're after listening? They're still supporting the band. Who cares if they're after listening
buying a piece of merch, like, how bad? Yeah. And I know it probably infuriates some people, like, oh, gatekeeping, I can't listen to, you know, you can't wear a t-shirt unless you're like a big fan of the band. It's like,
if you're a fan of the band, don't you want to see them doing well?
Exactly. You're just like, brilliant. You smile at the fact that somebody's walking around wearing a t-shirt of a band you like, even if they just think it's like a brand name rather than a band name. If you know
I think that was the great thing about the 80s with metal as well. With say when thrash metal started breaking, definitely were people like, I mean, you're always going to have people that were like, oh, we don't want, because like sure there was always that thing about punks and long hairs and you know fighting each other and all that shit. But like, I mean, there still was, well, over here anyway, there was that collective kind of thing where it was like everyone was into like, you know, I think then when death metal started coming out, I think people started getting a bit like,
that's a bit, but that's the thing, I feel like, I mean, most people like in Ireland, like Metallica played a gig in Slane and I think most of Ireland showed up to it.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
And it's the thing that it's not seen as like metal in some other subgenre. It's just like, oh yeah, I just like
Metallica have always been like, once they kind of took off or once they got known over here, they got fucking massive. Like, it's people, there's just something about like, I think Hetfield has some Irish ancestry in him, doesn't he?
Possibly some Irish connection.
But he looks Irish.
So you mean the alcoholism and stuff?
Yeah,
maybe,
and the handlebar moustache as well.
Yes,
I think there was something about him that probably resonated with a lot of Irish people. I think there's something about Metallica with thrash metal.
Yeah.
Like when thrash metal, like, I mean, say we just kind of covered like hair metal and then we get into thrash.
But yeah, every young fella in the 80s basically in Ireland had like, if you were not say into dance or something like that at that stage or into pop, you had long hair and you had like a beard or whatever, you just look fucking scuzzy. Yeah. And like, there you go, there's the look, like, you know.
But kind of like, I was going to say we talk about hair metal for a bit, but there's not really much to talk about it over here. It was the kind of the songs that get into the top of the chart, like fucking Mr. Big to Be With You, and so the ballads that always do well.
Yeah. Or the fun stuff as well, like, you know, start to come on, feel the noise or whatever, like, you know?
Yeah. But it's, you know, like we were saying, like Maiden had outsell them a million times to, you know, whenever a Maiden song would come out. But other than Maiden and AC/DC, I can't. Motorhead were, but Motorhead were really weird, kind of like over this side of the world, because everyone knew Motorhead and Motorhead were well liked, and there was like the Ace of Spades would pop up on adverts
on everything,
and there was like chocolate bars aimed at kids and it'd be like the Ace of Spades and all you played it. But so you kind of grew up just knowing a lot about these different bands, but never really thinking that they were like, oh, metal.
Yeah, that's it. So, it was just like, it was just music, like.
Yeah.
That's it.
With about thrash, I suppose, with like proper metal, kind of when it did start breaking, when it did start coming, Metallica were probably one of the first. With stuff like you won't read, like this is like Laura's a massive Metallica fan, but she's only really been into Metallica for
last 5 years or so. Before that, like obviously I was aware of him and obviously I listened to him and all the rest, but we went to see him live there. God, I can't even remember how long ago though. Ghost was supporting him and I was like, yeah, I'll go and see Metallica. Sure, Jesus, take it off the bucket list before we die, go and see Metallica. And I was like, Jesus Christ, they're fucking fab live, and kind of sunk straight back into him and it got me back into guitar playing and stuff like that as well. But that's the thing, like, I mean, there's cousins of mine that would like be big Metallica fans, but equally they'd like Taylor Swift or, you know what I mean? It's just Metallica is just something that every Irish person seems to have to like. Do you know what I mean? It's just, they're just there in the background, and you're aware of them, they're in your life, and if they come to Ireland, every Irish person is like, yeah, sure, we'll go and see them, they're fucking brilliant.
Megadeth as well. Like a lot of people, Megadeth, guaranteed they wouldn't be a household name, but they'd be...
No, they'd have their cash all right, I suppose, or the cachet, or however you pronounce that particular word, but they're a little bit more elitist, I suppose. If you're wearing a Megadeth t-shirt, you're a certain subgenre.
That was like people that were really into kind of like a trash
guitar and stuff like that.
It would have been like you'd see like proper people that if you not the bootleg Slayer kind of t-shirts, Megadeth t-shirts, Sepultura t-shirts. Anthrax not so much. Anthrax never seemed to really.
But funnily enough,
if they'd sell out in Ireland, if like they were playing in Ireland, they'd sell out. But you'd never really see.
But that was I actually only put two and two together there a while back. I had this terrible. Nobody would probably know what I'm talking about. But they're called boglins. They're these little tiny, weird little like plastic, rubbery faces that you can stick your finger into the back of, and you can manipulate it to make different faces. I had this boglin like when I was a very small child, and I loved it and all the rest, and then like I just suddenly put two and two together like a couple of years later. I was like, that's the fucking mascot that Anthrax always used, and I was like, it was in a pound shop in Ireland.
Anthrax have a mascot?
You know that face with the moustache?
No.
I'll show you.
I didn't know Anthrax had a mascot.
Well, they didn't, not necessarily a mascot, but it was like a face off an album that they had out. I can't even remember the fucking name of the album, but I remember looking and going, I had a boglin of that when I was 4. How did that fucking happen? Like, and I wasn't aware of it at all, but it was just in a pound shop or something like that. It was just like, here's an Anthrax fucking toy, and it's like, what the hell? How is this? And it was just so like, I don't know, ingrained into normal society, such it wasn't seen as this like strange thing to have. It's like, oh yeah, this Anthrax thing is kind of cool. Here's a toy for kids. Like, you know? Yeah.
Do you know who were actually big? And I can't remember if it would have been late 80s. There's people like, there's a guy called Alan Averill, for people who aren't familiar. He's a singer with a band called Primordial, and he's got he's in another couple of bands as well. I think he's probably Irish heavy metal royalty kind of a thing. Yeah. He wouldn't say that about himself. He definitely wouldn't say that about himself.
And he's not super well known either as well, but he knows everyone in metal as such.
Yeah, he's like Primordial or a big band. It's the same thing that happens with a lot of bands in Ireland. They're probably bigger abroad than they fucking are in Ireland.
Irish people don't support local. Yeah.
Like the Primordial, they're a fantastic band. I think he doesn't get a lot of recognition, or kind of the recognition he deserves for how he sings. Because I think a lot of this sounds like Bruce Dickinson on some stuff. Maybe a bit better. There's a bit more of a kind of an edge to him. But he can do real guttural kind of stuff as well. Like Vermin a Serpent, the new band he has out with a couple of other lads from Ireland. It's black metal album really, and it's fucking amazing. But he talks a lot. He'd be just that little bit older than us, and he would have been Dublin way, where there would have been a metal scene up there, like a very, very small metal scene, I suppose. But he talks about like some of the earlier gigs, going to him and seeing bands like Anthrax and Metallica when they were like smaller and stuff. But Death seemed to have been very popular with that lot. Yeah. Whereas I didn't. I think I was 12 and I bought a Death album, or maybe I was 13. I think it was that Leprosy album.
Oh yeah.
And it was from that second-hand store. And I got home, and I used to have a thing where a bit of a germaphobe, and I wouldn't touch it because I was like, I don't know who had this before.
Like, why did you
I don't know what it was with that album in particular, with the cover of it.
Yeah, the cover is like, particularly gross.
Yeah, I was just like, I can't touch it. Yeah. And it just sat there, and I never really listened to it. But it was like, I mean, for that to appear there, but there was something about Death there, or Autopsy as well. Fucking Autopsy. This is this is the end of the 80s and early 90s and stuff. Where it's like, well, I suppose we'd be remiss kind of for skipping over kind of like one of the biggest 80 metal bands who now would be a hard rock band, Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses fucking blew up in Ireland. Oh, totally. Then guaranteed it blew up everywhere, but
culture crack basically.
Yeah, fucking hell. Like Paradise City. Well, the first song was Welcome to the Jungle that was released. I remember it was like the first CD player that my older brother got. First hi-fi with a CD player he got. Bon Jovi's. It wasn't Slippery When Wet. It was the one after that had like Bad Medicine on it and all that. Yeah. And at the same day he got Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And or you'd be listening to the two, you know, you'd be like fucking constantly listening. And as well with the inlay for Appetite Destruction, it was a bit naughty. And it was, you know, as like a kid, you were kind of like, oh, I shouldn't be really looking at it. And then kind of when you get older, you kind of go, you really shouldn't be looking at it because it's like a fucking robot after raping and killing a woman. But it's like Guns N' Roses seemed real, and they had that kind of the attitude, and there was like songs with fuck in it and shit, you know, and it was like, oh my god. Whereas like the 80s, even though it was puritanical, I suppose, really. Like, I mean, you had the video nasties fucking kind of things.
I suppose, yeah, you had Thatcher and you had Reagan, you had that whole culture thing as well, but you equally had like the kind of the greed is good kind of thing as well, or is all about like indulgence.
For music coming out, where it was like the Backstreet, but not the Backstreet Boys, but fucking, you know, there was a lot of pure pop stars, and even with
Tiffany and stuff.
Rock, even with like hair metal, they they were fucking like going around riding anything with fucking legs, and I'm sure that the list of fucking sexual assault allegations towards some of these guys is fucking horrific. Like, but they were seen, because I think that the excess thing was accepted in the 80s, so they were like nearly people, it was something that people aspire to be, where it's like, oh, you can get all this money and you can have all the women and the fast cars, cocaine and alcohol.
Yeah. And I was seen as something that was good and cool and all the rest. Whereas nowadays that would be very much frowned upon. Like.
Whereas Guns N' Roses, even though they were excessive with their drinking and you know, they seemed to be that they were real, that it was like
they were
these,
a bit scuzzy.
that they were trouble with a capital T,
real big trouble.
But people just like Paradise City for some reason fucking just it was like every fucking second day, to the point where you're sick of it. And then it was the same with Sweet Child of Mine.
Oh god, yeah,
that was just fucking for years.
November Rain. I know they were getting up into the 90s now. But Jesus Christ.
But it was just like, oh my god. So, and like, you listen to the rest of that album, there's like fucking amazing. So that still hold up so well today. But like those ones that were the hits, I suppose, are I think that was a very clear delineation with those. Whereas like with some of those other bands, I was looking at an interview with George Lynch from, I think it's George Lynch's name, the guitarist from Doak, and he was saying, we're not necessarily proud of a lot of those songs that we did, but it's like when you find yourself at the point where you're making music that you're told to make rather than the music you want to make, you're not having a good time with it. So they were told, you're writing this ballad and you're doing this and you're doing that, you know. They all sounded the same, a lot of that hair metal stuff as well. It's probably why it didn't take off too much over in Ireland, where people were just a little bit kind of
well, that's, I suppose as well, a lot of the appeal of glam metal for, I don't know, people would probably be like sort of the outrageous outfits, the outrageous hair, the outrageous stage antics and all the rest. Whereas in Ireland it was just kind of like, yeah, so what, like.
Yeah, well, you see, the thing as well, I think it was because we didn't have MTV here at that stage, is what it was like.
But it was still like, I mean, you're talking about Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. I went to an all-girls school, and the amount of girls that were like, oh my god, he's so dreamy. And it's like, he's some fucking lunatic parading around in white cycling shorts. What the fuck?
But that was in the 90s.
I know, but like, God, you know.
But it was like with the hair metal thing, just with the, I was on that Metal Evolution, there's this woman that talks on it, I can't remember her name, but she's like a professor, I think in
metallurgy.
Yes. And she was saying that it's like the whole reason with hair metal, why it took off, it wasn't because the musicianship was good, it was because MTV, they suited MTV. It was a visual thing. People didn't really care as much about the music. They were just, so if MTV didn't exist, they wouldn't have taken off. And that was pretty much what happened over here. They didn't, like a lot of those bands didn't take off. Maybe some of their songs, like say even with like Poison, if you ask a lot of people to name a Poison song in Ireland that ran it, they'd fucking struggle. Maybe Every Rose Has a Thorn, and that's probably because of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Not so much Poison, because like Bill and Ted was massive in Ireland, so I don't fucking mind. But it's, you know, it's like Warrant, all, you know, they just didn't.
Wasp, any of those kind of things.
Wasp. There was a group of lads that I used to hang around when I got older, that were about a couple of years older than us, and they were all into Wasp from when they were younger, because like I think people kind of found it was like, because it was like, we are sexual perverts, and like, you know,
dirty,
fuck like an animal, you know. It was that thing that just like appeals to teenagers, or it's like, boys, it's rude, he said Willie, but where were we going with this?
It was just the whole glam look, I suppose. It suited MTV, but not so much. Ireland didn't have that kind of thing,
But with Guns N' Roses. But for some reason, Guns N' Roses, I think that was the thing with Guns N' Roses as well, that people were like, the danger aspect to it and the criminality of it, because like there was always stories about Axl Rose punched a guy in a wheelchair, and all these kind of fucking things, whereas like Ireland has this weird fucking, well, I don't think it's a weird thing, a lot of countries have it, I think it's just a human condition where they
anti-authoritarian,
deify fucking criminals with it. So they these names. So when you hear about like the likes of Guns N' Roses and Slash, people love Slash.
I know, that was just because he just fucking, everyone was like, oh, he's so cool and he's so aloof and all the rest. I was like, yeah, he's fucking, he can't talk because he's most fucking, of the time. That's why.
But I think with Guns N' Roses, when people got into Guns N' Roses, that was definitely a big gateway for people into heavier music in Ireland. Like, it definitely, like for people that wouldn't have been aware of some of the heavier bands.
As well, like, I mean, I'll point out, I've got I know loads of friends, loads of family relatives and all the rest, where they're like mad Guns N' Roses fans, absolutely fucking love them, and then that's it. They don't, they're not metal fans, or they're not hard rock fans. They're just Guns N' Roses plus whatever shit is in the charts kind of.
But that's what I think a lot of people are like that. Where it is just kind of it's not necessarily what's popular, but people identify with certain things that they like with music, and it doesn't necessarily have to be easy. Whereas like then you get like to a teenager and you want to kind of like identify with the scene,
pick your tribe kind of a thing.
So like I mean I think before like punk was very big in Ireland in the 80s. Very big.
I was going to say, sure, I lived in the middle of nowhere, and I can remember in my local village and stuff like that, when I was coming out of school, there'd be a couple of like girls that would have like mohawks and stuff, and you're kind of, I kind of took that for granted. But then when you're kind of looking back on a culture and all the rest, a lot of that would have been confined to the bigger cities, but not so in Ireland. It was like out in the middle of the country, I've got my mohawk and my fucking safety pins and stuff.
And punk goth music. You're not like Susie and the Banshees and the Cure and all that, but like, I mean, I knew people that were like, you're talking about weird fucking goth music, like, not like bands that were like popular bands. Like I wouldn't know, but like, I mean, I remember like a few people that I knew when, like, man, I'm talking about like under 10 that were like big into the Sisters of Mercy. Where you're just, I don't know if you get that in other places or if you get that with people like it was the bleakness of Ireland or something.
Bit like Norway, where it's like you're just predisposed to be melancholy and a bit sort of like, on the fringes or whatever.
But like that with the Irish kind of thing with music as well, like people seem to be, you could be into dance music and into metal. Now if you dressed as a metaler and people dressed it, you'd end up having fights or you get attacked fucking into the 90s and definitely in the 80s, because I remember hearing about it was like the mods
or the Silkies as well, the tracksuits
but like in the 80s it would have been like the mods and the punks would have been fucking hammering the shit out of each other over things. But like punk was really bad, not like fucking, it was like not like the Sex Pistols punk. Fugazi was really big when they were around. I think that might have been into the 90s. So, but like it was all these kind of oi bands. I remember hearing that they were just nearly, if you taught a kind of what does skinhead racist punk music sound like, that's it. But they wouldn't have been like racist kind of, at least I don't think they were. Like I don't know.
The music.
And hardcore stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You have your crossover and your hardcore and all the rest, and that seemed to be fairly big as well.
But that's when you were talking about, like, it's weird when you do it, whereas like metal was nearly mainstream to a certain point, and then you had all these kind of like underground kind of things that weren't so much underground, but they were all over the fucking place as well. And then when techno music came along, fucking kind of where I'm from was like seen as techno fucking city. People just love techno. That's all that people listened to. But it was the same time. A lot of lads that I knew that were big into metal loved techno music. They loved going to fucking dance clubs or going to raves. As much as they did going to, I think a lot of those lads, they ended up, it was just a weird mix.
Very weird crossover,
with it. But I think that was like the 80s.
It was a bit of, I suppose, like, I mean, it's normal to us because we grew up through it and that's what you experience and all the rest. But looking back on it now, you're kind of like, oh, it's a bit weird. Yeah,
it's just, I thought it'd be an interesting podcast to do kind of for it, a different kind of take on it, because a lot of the times,
It's either British
is.
or American rather than Irish. Yeah, and Irish would be, I suppose, at that stage probably would have been nearly a third world country.
Yeah.
You know, so sort of you'd have the same, I suppose, if you want to like into like, I don't know, Brazil or somewhere like that, where people are like mad heavy metal fans, but they don't have access to.
They didn't have access. That's when you used to hear about like bands when they would play in Ireland, it'd be like fucking, they'd be going, oh my god, the Irish fans are
go nuts for it. Yeah, exactly same as Brazilians or whatever.
Like, I think that's why Metallica used to, like, I mean, Hetfield used to go hunting in Ireland. They come, because as well at the time, like, because of Ireland being an island, and like England being the closest thing, unless a band was playing in England, then logistically they'd have to kind of go, well, fucking, where do we, you know, you can't get out in a day, and the flights weren't as frequent.
No, and it
would
was
have been very
super expensive for travel, trying to ship all your like your gear in and all the rest. If you're anyway of a big band or even a small band.
Yeah. Now Sepultura played in Dublin, I think. I remember someone talking about it, and they were saying that it was because they were like, how did these Brazilian fellas with no money just end up here? And they ended up like sleeping in one of the fans' houses or something like that, you know, and they were meant to be lovely and they were like really, really nice, but they didn't have much English, you know, and stuff. But, you know, I think they were like an exception.
That's even to the state, or I mean, like the metal scene in Ireland is like, you could be sitting waiting forever and like turning into like that lad out of fucking Indiana Jones and Rage, or the Grail, like, you know, that whole thing. Where
I thought you were going to be on about that mutt, Indiana Jones' the son.
No.
Out of your favourite film, The Christmas Skull.
The Christmas Skull, or whatever the fuck it is. But no, it's like you could be sitting here like turn ancient into your 90s waiting for a band to show up in Ireland. You're just going to have to go to Europe or to England or something like that to see it, because they just don't swing around by here because of the logistics and the cost.
And now since COVID it's
even worse. Like, and cost of touring in general is just.
But Taylor Swift is playing here, so that's good.
Let's go see her.
That'll be the next podcast that we do about Taylor Swift.
I doubt it.
But yeah, that was the 80s. I hope you enjoyed. Head over and follow her. There's a very
sparse Instagram at the moment,
and stuff if you want like updates on bits and pieces, and as well our channel over on YouTube, the Retro Rejects, where we stream occasionally and we'll have videos. Hopefully we'll have them up at this stage. But yeah, thank you for listening if you got this far.
Rock on.
We will talk to you. I wanna suck.